Okay, it is about that time. So I call to order this meeting of the Champaign County Board Data Center Activities Task Force. Could we please call the roll?
Rodriguez,
Here.
McCrory McKay, Esri,
Here.
Young, Rain,
Here.
Rice, Sage,
Here.
Newell,
Here.
Aris,
Okay, we have a quorum present, even though we don't need one, but yep. Okay, so moving forward, can I get a motion for an approval of the agenda? Also noting that we would need a motion to add a presentation to the agenda. So I know I can't make that motion myself as chair, but if somebody would be willing, that'd be wonderful.
Make a motion to move the agenda as presented with the addition of a presentation under new business, I assume.
That's right.
Is it going to be B or A, or is it going to be the new A?
Be 7A.
Okay, 7A, and then we'll move B down, or the A is presented, move down to B, kind of, or is it mixed in?
Yep, or I think A is like it's
It'll be mixed
proposed.
in.
No,
Okay.
it's the proposed thing that we're adding tonight. Is that right? I mean, yeah. Okay, so there's no B. There's just the A.
My fault.
Oh, B will be
Okay.
John's memo. Okay, so
Okay.
there is an. Okay, I understand. All right, can I get a second for that?
Oh, second.
Okay, Newell first.
Or Deb can.
Got to be fast here. Okay, I now need a motion for the approval of the minutes. Oh, do I need to?
Need to vote on it.
Yep. Okay, all in favor of the agenda as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, we have an agenda. We can now move forward to the approval of minutes from May 4th, 2026 and June 1st, 2026, which I'd like to do as an omnibus motion. Any edits to those minutes? Discussion? Okay, seeing none, can we have a motion? Second?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, great. Second?
Second.
Okay, wonderful. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, we have our minutes. All right, we are now to the point of our meeting where we can hear from the public. So we are limiting comments, this opportunity, to 5 minutes. This is an opportunity to address the task force and then also the community on the issue of data centers in our data center ordinance in Champaign County. So if that's something that interests you, I do have some slips. There's still time to bring a slip to me if you'd like. First, I have Anne Marie.
Push the button at the bottom to turn it on, the
Set up.
microphone.
I see. Okay. Yep. It works. Thank you. I have to be really quick because when I practiced, I was way over the time. So I have researched from communities that have successfully, let's say, gotten data centers under control, however you want to interpret that. Their recommendation at the top is to just ban them completely, but I understand that's not really what the thinking is right now. So they go through and make recommendations for other communities on what to do with regulations to attempt to control this situation. They say that it is best at the state level to get control to reduce financial risk and to increase grid stability, that those things are best handled at the state level, and it's very difficult for local communities to really protect their communities on those two topics, reducing financial risks and increasing grid stability. And on the Prairie Rivers Network website, they have a review of what our state has done with the recent data center bill called the Power Act. So you can read their analysis there. The state of Illinois in the 2026 election cycle received $94 million from the super PACs involved in promoting AI and promoting data centers, which was the top in the nation. The second highest super PAC funding recipient was Texas, Legislature's $10 million less than in Illinois. So we probably aren't going to see enthusiastic support for regulating data centers in the state of Illinois at the state level. So we may not be able to protect school district funding and other local interests without state commitment. Now, setting aside that, specific regulations that other communities recommend is to not let the data center owners or managers control the energy and power infrastructure at all. They don't build it, they don't provide it, they don't make promises. And when they don't do that, then when they fail to come through with what they promise, which is common, you guys don't have to worry about enforcing it. So their recommendation is no off-grid or behind-the-meter power responsibilities on behalf of the data center, no backup generators. In Memphis, Tennessee, they're using diesel generators on big flatbed trucks as their power supply, so they'll pull stuff like that. What these organizations recommend is to require will-serve letters from folks like Ameren, whatever the utility would be, require a will-serve letter up front specifying what additional energy supply they can do and exactly how they will do that. In great detail, there's a mandatory tax on the data center. The rate goes up when peak uses go up. That tax pays for the infrastructure. So the power company who is regulated is responsible for the building of the infrastructure and the maintaining of the infrastructure. It's all under oversight, and the data center pays for it, and it has to be a fair payment. The customers don't pay and the utility doesn't pay. The most important recommendation is that the data center's power can be reduced or cut off completely, so that if the human beings or other life in the world needs resources, the data center can be downplayed or cut off completely. There's an example of a 14-state business, I forgot, JMP or something, PJM, covers 14 states. There's a coalition of legislators across all 14 states, and all of the data centers that that particular utility serves power to have had to agree to that premise that they can have their power shut down or cut off completely if necessary. So one other bit of information about the state of Illinois, we currently have 28 megawatts operational. We have 2.67 gigawatts that are new and committed. They're either newly online, they're committed and we can count on them. The demand for data centers already in Illinois has a 6.01 gigawatt shortfall beyond what's already counted on, beyond that. And 29% of that is proposed centers, 71% of 6.01 gigawatt shortfall for the state of Illinois has gone farther down the process than just proposal.
Thank you. We now have Deborah Kempker Montgomery.
To start, I'd like to say as a resident, I opposed a new data center in our community. The issue, though, I'd like to address tonight is on AI companies' overall lack of transparency. Other communities have indicated that AI companies require the local government to sign NDA or non-disclosure agreements. As a local resident, I believe we need an open and transparent process without deals being cut in secret. If an NDA is required, it should be a non-starter for our community. Residents need to know all the decisions that are made, who the company is, if there are tax breaks locally or through the state, what the AI company is giving to the county, and what they expect in our resources in return. In other communities, government employees refuse to answer questions, often saying they signed an NDA, were not able to answer that question. That position is not acceptable, and I don't believe in Champaign it'll be acceptable to most of the residents here. And again, I want to just go on the record that I oppose having a data center in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Ty Newell.
First of all, thank you all for serving on this committee. It's a thankless job to try to figure out a pathway forward. I'm an Urbana resident, homeowner, also a co-owner of a business on High Cross Road, and then am an owner of the High Cross Art Studio, a 7,800 square foot building on High Cross Road that you've probably gotten to enjoy some of the artwork from our 9 wonderful artists that are currently in residence. I wanted to speak a little about energy. That's my background. Our house is 100% solar powered, 2 EVs since 2012. Our business, a 4,500 square foot Morton building, solar powered. And the High Cross Art Studio that we acquired about 3 years ago had a $650 a month utility bill, and despite rising utility costs, our latest bill that we just got yesterday was $333. And in about 2 weeks, when I flip the switch on a 10 kilowatt solar array, it's going to drop in half again. So what I wanted to address as far as energy and data centers is that this is a revolutionary time period in our history, that we're talking a 4,000 terawatt hour electric energy usage currently in the U.S., increasing by 2,000 terawatt hours to 6,000. This is a huge increase. Now, our grid is underutilized, so it has plenty of capacity to manage that, but how we come up with that extra energy is something to determine. And what I'd like you to consider is that there are alternative pathways instead of the pathways that are mostly being considered, how the utility revives a retired nuclear failed power plant in Pennsylvania, or a retired at the end of life coal power plant in Terre Haute, that both are increasing the local utility costs, that there's an alternative pathway. And this pathway is one that could reduce the utility bill, the electric utility bill of our residents by 50%. And so I'd like to discuss that a little bit. But to give you a little bit idea on energy and what we use in our households, we currently, on average in the U.S., and we're pretty average here, about 10,500 kilowatt hours a year usage. That's about $2,000 at our typical rates, but as you know, that went up by about 20-30% this summer. And this additional energy that these data centers are going to load on the country is about 15,000 kilowatt hours per household per year. Somehow that will get paid, and that's going to come out of every household's pockets. Even though it sounds like this business or that investor's paying for it, when you follow it through, it finally ends up coming out of our pockets in every household. So, so this is what we need to figure out, is what that solution could be. And the solution, a solution path that's been proposed, it's been implemented in Minnesota, New York, and Massachusetts are looking at it, is to put solar on every household that's funded by these data centers. It's a tiny fraction of the investment going into these data centers. It's a tiny fraction of the anticipated revenue generation by these data centers, and it absolutely works. It consists of putting in about a 5,000 watt solar array, about 250 square feet, the size of the roof above your garage for your car's parking space, and then adding a battery that's about the size of a dorm refrigerator. The cost of the solar array, about $10,000. The cost of the battery, about $4,000, about half for components, about half for local labor to install it. And what happens, the previous speaker had said no behind the meter for the data center. this is behind our meters in our homes. So if the data center fails, we still gain that energy savings, but we are also then the power plant for the data center that's going to be fed out of our solar arrays and out of our batteries. And if roughly 40,000 of our residences out of the 85,000 residences in Champaign County were to participate, that this would be about a 200 megawatt power plant. It's a big deal, but it also protects us. So as this data center boom or bust is successful or fails, we're still left with the energy savings in all of our households. And in addition, what these savings have incorporated in them, and as maybe you've seen some power failures in your neighborhood with the past storms, is that this battery backup and an automatic transfer switch coupled with solar keeps your house operating, keeps your food from spoiling in the fridge and in the freezer. It makes our community more resilient, saves us money, and especially for those with very little disposable income, this can be the difference between being able to go out and eat or to repair a car. But thank you very much. I have a couple of handouts that you can copy and distribute. These are from Jigger Shah, a University of Illinois graduate, but who's internationally renowned in this type of area, and he recently posted on this type of concept.
Okay, thank you. That's the last public input slip that I have. Last call.
If there's not enough handouts, what do we do?
We'll pass them through and then probably make photocopies and share them that way. Yeah. Okay, seeing no more interest in public participation, we can now move on to communications. So a few reminders before we begin, and then I have some communications that I want to share. We're trying to use this section to revisit any text that's been given to us, any changes to our resolution as it stands from John Hall. And this is an opportunity to revisit the language that's been presented to us and add any changes. It's not the only opportunity that we have for that, but I did just want to underline that as an option to use this section. I also wanted to circle back to our discussion on legal advice and home rule and what authority that we have. So the county is contracted with a law firm, and we are meeting with them this week. So I'm going to try to compile some questions that we've got so far about what we can do and what we can't do. And we'll raise those to the attorney and, just to get some advice on where we can go and where we cannot go. And then finally, just to put this on your radar is that we will need to begin preparing for some kind of a town hall event to hear from people in a larger scale than this room, right? So just being able to take input from the public, where we do very little talking, but we do take in a lot of information. Okay, those are my communications. Anybody else?
So we're looking at like what you gave us as far as from Aurora. Is that what I'm discussing?
That's a template, yeah. You could, if there are things that you'd like to include or questions that you have, you could note those here.
I guess on the, I guess, I don't even know what page, maybe the second page on the Aurora thing, it's talking about the on-site things. And it says that, that the on-site renewable energy generation sufficient to supply not less than 25%. So I'm just, and then it says, or have a on-storage battery. And why is it an or? Why can't it be both? Why wouldn't you need a backup in case they can't provide at least 25%? I just have a question about that.
If the task force thinks that it's reasonable to require both, you can certainly recommend that. I think the Aurora drafters were, I don't know, being not quite as rigid and saying either or, but there's no reason why you can't ask for both. At least no reason I'm aware of.
Okay.
So the agenda has an item about the draft that was circulated to us that John put together. I have comments on that. Would you like me to have those comments be now or in the agenda item?
Like on the particular
The
issue or?
new business A is the
Oh.
memorandum on proposed requirements for energy impact, which is what Deb was just commenting on. And I have some comments, and I'm just wondering if I should just do them now, which is fine. I can do them now.
Yeah, so for point of order, we're in communications right now. So if anyone has any general communications about the concept of the task force or general information they want to share with the other task force members, that's where we're at right now.
Awesome. Yeah.
So when does he,
Item B.
Yeah, we just need to move out of communications. It doesn't,
Yep, I think the general thing that I'm trying to emphasize at least is that if we're looking for opportunities to, hey, I remember that we brought this up for conversation last time that we met. I'd like to circle back to it. I'd like to see these types of changes reflected in the ordinance. I mean, even if you want to return to water, which is not the item on the that's going to be addressed in 7B here, you could note that. That's what I mean to say. Okay, anything else for communications? Okay, seeing none, we can now pivot to our presentation. So we are going to hear from Mark Pruitt from the Power Bureau. He has extensive background in energy management. In particular, he worked on the impact analysis for Sangamon Valley as a third party. So with nothing further to do, I believe we're hearing from Mr. Pruitt by Zoom.
Good evening. My name is Mark Pruitt. Thank you for the invitation. I'm going to go off.
It is not. Give us a moment. Well, now we have the Zoom screen. Yep, that's good. Could you a person on the inside? Could you maximize that? Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Thank you.
Good.
Ready when you are.
Good. Sorry, one of these days I'll learn where all the buttons are. not every power plant operates all the time. They have to be allowed to operate. They get to be allowed to operate in the MISO market if they clear an auction. So there's today an auction to determine which power plants operate each hour of the day tomorrow. So it's through this planning and bidding cycle that the least cost resources in this graph, resources are generators, A, B, C, and D, only the amount of electricity that is needed for a given hour is contracted. If you have too many power plants operating, you can cause a blackout. So what happens here is that for every hour of tomorrow, MISO runs an auction, and using that auction process, they determine which power plants operate in each hour to be delivered tomorrow. Okay, so this is where prices come from. This is why we have price volatility. And because the auction is based on the balance of supply and demand, when supply and or demand change, prices change. And that's what we're going to talk about next. So this is the projection of peak demand, the maximum power demand for MISO going into the future. And they update this every year as part of their long-term forecast, long-term load forecast, or LTLF. And you see that the light blue line, dash line going off to the right, represents the most recent updated projection in 2025. You see that that was higher than the projection that was made in 2024, and you see that that is quite a bit higher than the projection that was in 2023. And all that this is showing is that in 2025, the MISO system, throughout all those states served by MISO, the maximum peak demand was projected to be about 121 gigawatts. That's 121 gigawatts is about the equivalent of about 60 nuclear power plants, if that helps. But this is part of what is new in the market. Look backwards on the green line. Going back to 2030, load has been flat to falling or within a very tight range. This is one of the first times in my career that we see sustained upticks in demand. So that's new. At the same time, we have quite a few power projects that are trying to come online as well. As you see, based on this graph, you see quite a bit of growth in solar and in wind, which is green. But even so, within MISO, there's quite a bit of natural gas as well as battery storage that are seeking to come online as well. So that's good news, right? If you have increased demand, which could be from data centers or other large manufacturers, it's good to see more supply coming online to keep prices in balance. The challenge that we see in the market is that based on a study by Lawrence Berkeley Laboratories that tracked the success rate of power generators in connecting to regional grids, you see here in MISO that only 21% of the projects, of the megawatts, the size of the projects, only 21% were approved over that 10-year period. That means only about 15% of all projects were approved. So that's going to be a real problem for us from a pricing standpoint, because as demand's growing, we're seeing that the success of proposed projects is pretty low, and that's causing supply to stay flat. So if you have flat supply and rising demand, you're going to have a shortage at some point in time. I'm not going to read this to you, but this is from the most recent seasonal outlook from NERC, the national, which is our national grid planning organization. And you see at the top for MISO, they're showing high level of risk starting in 2028 for project imbalances. Now, this doesn't mean that the lights are going out. It just means that the balance between supply and demand is getting tighter than what can be estimated to be the right level or the reserve margin level of excess electricity in the market. Markets going into red mean that they don't have as much as they should. Doesn't mean that they're not enough. It just means that it's not as much as it should be to meet the highest levels of reliability that are sought for the U.S. grid. And you see that MISO is not alone. PJM, Texas, the western states as well, are all in the same boat. The state of Illinois has found that this is also going to be the case locally. If you look over to the right, the bars represent the amount of capacity, that's the generating capacity that's available in MISO as projected going forward. And then you see the dashed line. The black dashed line is the peak demand. So you see going forward that into 28, 29, into 30, that dashed line hits right about halfway up the stack of resources. The problem is that southern and central Illinois has domestic resources. Those are all the colors, all the way up to the blue band at the top. The blue band at the top of each column is capacity transfer limit. That is the ability of the regional system to transfer capacity into central and southern Illinois. So that's imported power. The challenge that we're seeing in Ameren is that if capacity is getting tight in all of our surrounding states, there might not be enough available in all of the surrounding states to meet the demand in central southern Illinois. So that's why we point out 2031 as being the threshold when Illinois is consistently counting on imports. And the question is, will the imported capacity be there when central southern Illinois needs it? Issue of cost is really where a lot of the supply and demand balance issue comes from or devolves to. You see in the blue table, I'm sorry, look in the graph on the left, you see all the colored areas are portions, wholesale markets that are served by MISO. You see number 4, central southern Illinois. That means that indicates that Illinois portion of MISO, the majority in central southern Illinois, is Ameren, Illinois. That's zone 4. Zone 3 is by the Quad Cities, and then zone 1, MISO, in the far northwest corner of Illinois, is that's up by Galena. But what's happened from a supply and demand standpoint is that capacity prices have gone up. Capacity is the ability for power plants to meet the maximum demand for power in an area, and there's a price that's set on it through an auction every year by MISO. And we see in the blue table how those seasonal prices for capacity have changed. Summer capacity in 2023-2024 was $10 a megawatt day. However, in 2025-26, $666. That's where the prices popped up in the past few years, has been on that summer capacity charge. What does that mean for a consumer? Drop down to the green table. If you have a residential account, their peak demand is probably about 5 kW at the rate for capacity, which would be row B, is entered into for each year, and then the numbers of days in the year. If you multiply the peak demand by the rate, by the days of year, number of days in the year, you come up with an annual cost for capacity. This gets fed into consumer rates. You see in 23-24, that cost for a typical single-family home is about $168 per customer. It was, again, built into your rates. However, in 2025-26, that rose to $3,960. Pretty major. Good news is prices come down for the June 26 to 27 period. And let's talk a little bit about that. I've highlighted the 2 capacity years, and you see that, wow, things really, they didn't come back down to earth. They're still pretty high, but those rates largely dropped by about 40%. Why was that? Well, in the planning resource auction that was just held this April, there was a little bit more capacity that was bid into those auctions that cleared. When you have increase in supply, you get lower prices. So just with those marginal increases in supply, 3.5% during the summer, 5.7% in the fall, 4.2% in winter, 4.7% in spring, about 40% of the capacity price went away. What this really indicates is that in the face of increased demand, you need more supply. Talk about some federal trends here. I think most folks are familiar that the current administration has supported additional interventions in the market to facilitate the continued use of fossil fuels. I'm not commenting on that from a policy perspective. I'm just saying that at the federal level, there's been a change from what it's been over the past several years. And from a power perspective, those benefits going to the fossil fuel industry have also occurred at the same time when certain tax credits and primary financing vehicles for renewable energy have been expired. This is just the capital stack, where the money comes from to build, say, a community solar project. And you see that energy payments are a good portion of that, followed by renewable energy credits, followed by depreciation, which is a federal taxing issue, then the investment tax credit. Those typically made up 10 to 12% of the value of money that goes into providing capital for projects. Under federal policy, the investment tax credit is largely going away. So a lot of wind, solar, and some other types of projects that rely on investment tax credits to achieve financing, they're having difficulty having to withdraw from the market. So that's at the federal level. At the state level, the state is undertaking an integrated resource plan for the first time in 30 years to identify what can the state do to address electricity resource requirements. This is a process that's ongoing right now. It's being hosted by the Illinois Commerce Commission. They're expected to have their plan out in November to identify what measures the state can take to address capacity requirements in Illinois. We expect that they're going to focus on energy efficiency, renewable energy, and battery storage. At least that's what the mandate is for them to be concerned with. There's also the Renewable Energy Access Plan, which is in its second phase, and it is seeking to identify mechanisms to accelerate interconnection of primarily wind resources to the regional grids to, again, bring new capacity online with greater certainty and speed. Those of you in local government, I'm sure, are very aware that the Clean and Reliable Grid Affordability Act did place some limits on local governments around power generation projects. And I'm not going to dwell on this, it's a lot of words. I'll leave this for you, and the elected officials and administration folks on your board can give you more details, as I'm sure they've looked at it much more closely than a civilian such as myself. Why were there limits placed on local governments as it relates to providing zoning and permitting for energy projects? Well, it's because the industry has noted, as shown in this graph, that a primary leading cause of cancellation of wind and solar projects is local ordinances and zoning. So the surge legislation was passed largely to try to reduce that level of projects that are lost to local ordinances and zoning constraints. So to wrap things up, will we run out of power? The quick answer is no. MISO is mandated to maintain reliability. All new generation and all new loads have to be approved before they can connect to the MISO grid. No one's going to hook up a data center in the middle of the night without MISO's approval. If there's insufficient capacity to meet a new data center, MISO will tell them, we can serve you, but it might be 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 years down the road. When the developers hear that there's extended periods of time to be able to get capacity, they tend to move on. So in a sense, the industry or the economics around the industry will cause more developers to start to leave Illinois as capacity constraints start to really show themselves in delays in getting capacity approvals. Will cost return to normal levels? Possibly. As we saw on the capacity price slide a little bit earlier, small amounts of new capacity can really do an outsized job of reducing prices. More capacity is coming online, the state's renewable portfolio standard and battery storage and MISO accelerating project interconnections are all probably going to start helping prices move in the right direction. And then we'll deny data centers in the state or locally, help normalize the markets, meaning, if data centers, aren't finding a way to get developed, would that help bring prices back down? And the answer is probably no, because the data centers that couldn't locate in Illinois will locate in other portions of MISO, and based on how the markets operate, that would have essentially the same effect on the regional grid as if they were located in Illinois. So wouldn't necessarily make a big difference in terms of the market. And with that, I'm happy to respond to any questions. I'm sorry if I went long, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Any questions? Deb?
So that map that I saw, it goes from Canada to like Louisiana, that area. And so there's different zones. And so one zone borrows from another zone if they need more energy. Is that what happens? So our zone could be, I should say, attacked or, grabbed energy from for some other state, or, because it's all one consortium. Is that correct?
That's largely correct, yes. These zones are connected to each other.
So that basically means we can't protect ourselves from other states. Is that true? From using.
I'm not trying to be argumentative. I don't know what
Okay.
you mean by protect yourself.
Okay. Okay. Sorry.
You're doing just fine. Kevin? Yeah.
First of all, Mark, thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate it. Would you be able to go to it was number 25, the slide number 25? I saw something on there. Yeah, right there. The prohibition on bans and moratoria. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. So I probably should have.
Thank you.
Hi, Mark. Andrew, also have a question for you. Andrew Rain with Prairie Rivers Network. you said the MISO cannot say no to a load coming on a large load, or sorry, that they can say no to a large load. But my understanding was that utilities have an obligation to serve. I'm wondering, is because Illinois is deregulated, is that why that statement is there, or am I incorrect about the obligation to serve?
Well, perhaps I misspoke, and if I did, I apologize. So
Thank you. I had a few questions. On your slide 12, you have the projected. Yes. Can you just give me maybe 4 or 5 factors in these projections? Is it like pass load, weather data, permit requirements, and so forth?
well, great question. When we say load, that means demand. So these are customers.
And, and you're hearing about these because of like requests for permit, or I'm wondering how MISO hears about them. I
Well,
assume these haven't all been approved yet.
Well, okay, that's great.
Okay. Okay, then my second question is, so we've heard about these diesel turbines in Boxtown in Memphis. So where do they live in this system? They generate their own power, so they're not drawing from something like a MISO equivalent. I didn't know which one is in Louisiana or, that part of Tennessee. So where does something like this, independent generators for a data center, live within this system?
Well, I'm not,
Thank you. Sure.
Thank you, Mark. This has been really helpful. Could you go forward a slide?
sure.
One more. Oh, so I have two questions. The first one is, so this 15%, why is it so low?
Couple of things.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Can you go forward another slide?
Sure.
One more. That one's way too much.
Sorry about that.
So this capacity transfer limit, so the capacity transfer, is that what you were talking about between the zones within MISO, or is this
Yep.
other jurisdictions into MISO?
This is everything into zone 4.
So
Each zone MISO is different than each
Okay, that's what I was asking. So the larger entities exchange power with each other. So data centers being built in other parts of the country, even outside of MISO, are impacting MISO.
I would say yes.
Okay. I think that was all.
Any additional questions? Andrew?
In that graph on the right, I see the solar. This isn't new supply, right? So I'm just surprised to see the solar band shrinking and shrinking. Am I reading this correctly?
You're reading it correctly, but you're asking the right question. There's a reason here. So when these projections are made, the study to come up with the columns, what they're doing is two things. They're looking at the capacity the same way that MISO looks at capacity. So they go and count every wind turbine, every solar farm, every nuclear plant in the MISO or Ameren zone that we see here, and then they apply what's called an ELCC. That's an estimated load carrying characteristic variable, and that accounts for the availability of that power supply, that power generation at system peak demand. So if you take nuclear power, for instance, nuclear power is almost always on and almost always on during the summer. So the ELCC for nuclear is about 94 to 95%, meaning that 94 to 95% of that capacity can be counted on to be available during summer peak demand. Other resources are not as fully operational as say nuclear. And what you're seeing here with solar is that solar used to have an ELCC of 50%, meaning that if you had 1,000 megawatts of solar in Illinois, it could be credited 500 megawatts of capacity to sell into the system for planning purposes, because it's not always certain that 100% of the solar will be available when the regional grid hits its peak. It could be cloudy, it could be rainy, different reasons can cause solar to not generate at the same time the system peak is occurring. Between 2026 and 2035, that ELCC factor for solar is dropping from 50% down to, I believe, 9%. And that's largely reflective that the peak demand period within Ameren and largely all of MISO is moving later in the day. So instead of the system peak happening at, say, 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it's going to be peaking closer to 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night when solar generation is much lower. So the logic within MISO is to reduce how much they credit solar for capacity requirement for capacity planning purposes. And you're seeing that reflected in the graph, where even though there's more and more solar going up in the region, less and less of it counts against peak demand because it's not a dispatchable resource. Probably more than you wanted to know.
Michelle?
Has MISO or any of the other entities issued preferred large data center power requirements, like X percentage renewable, or any guidelines in that vein?
Usually requirements for renewable portfolio standards are made at the state level. So it wouldn't necessarily be MISO making that determination. It would be Illinois or Indiana or Missouri state legislators making those decisions about renewables. In Illinois, a data center served by Ameren or ComEd or MidAmerican will be paying that utilities fee that's charged to every consumer to support the renewable portfolio standard. So as large users, these assets will be contributing a lot of dollars over their life into those fees, and those fees are collected by the utilities. And then with those funds, the utilities purchase renewable energy credits from wind and solar generators that locate in Illinois. So that might not be the direct linkage that you're looking for, but that's likely how things would happen in Illinois.
I guess I'm thinking more along the lines of, if a large capacity data center wants to open and MISO is saying, sure, we can fully power you in 6 years. Is there a conversation between the two entities where MISO is telling the data center, unless you bring X amount in renewable, then it could be faster? Is that a negotiation that happens?
No,
Okay.
we haven't seen that. Although I believe it was yesterday, an order was issued by FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, requiring MISO, PJM, and the other ISOs to establish new rules around data center interconnection. So perhaps there's something similar to what you just described that could make its way into those rules. I believe it's a 60 or 90-day rulemaking process.
If I could offer, I'm pretty sure BYO, bring your own, is being discussed at some of these utilities. I think PJM is maybe looking at this. And Mark, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here, but I feel like I've been seeing that discussed at the interconnection level. Probably not renewables, but just bring your own energy as part of expectations for interconnection for data centers. But I might not have that fully right.
I think you're right. It's a little lumpy in terms of where it's being considered and how it's being done. I can tell you that for a lot of states, the utilities have been working to establish new rules and new rates that deal with data centers covering all the cost of, say, distribution system upgrades that are necessary to serve their big, very large loads. MISO and PJM, they very well might be in a position where bring your own capacity can accelerate things. I've seen that written up as well. But that's going to play out a little bit differently even at the state level, because in Illinois, it's hard to, the state law just really doesn't allow Ameren and ComEd to build new power plants, and it's unknown how a bring your own would necessarily work. Doesn't mean it can't, it just means it's not as clear cut as in Indiana, where the Public Utility Commission establishes rules for utilities to build power plants as opposed to independent power producers.
I just wondered, like, about the solar. Is it from designated solar farms, or is it households that are adding into the grid, or all of those things?
All of them, yeah. So the terminology used in the industry is front of the meter and behind the meter. So behind the meter is what you described, solar on the rooftop of a home, and you could have solar on in a field that's front of the meter. So that's connected to the grid, and all these projections contemplate both.
Thanks.
Amy.
Oh, I guess further on the topic of solar, when you talked about the, let's see, the ELCC for solar, that it's projected to go down because the peak demand is kind of when it's dark outside, right?
Right.
I guess I'm uncertain how batteries fit into this. You're talking about the kind of the active amount coming in from a solar cell right then, or you're not looking at any stored solar power?
Right. So you're spot on with your how you describe the ELCC. What the capacity, the ELCC for solar is just based on solar alone. If it's solar paired with batteries, then the way MISO looks at it is that the solar has one level of ELCC and the battery has a different level of ELCC. I believe the batteries right now have somewhere between I think a 4-hour battery has maybe a 54% or maybe a 58% ELCC. And, they're viewed as being more dispatchable, more useful to meet that system peak. So therefore they have a higher value, but they're typically accounted for separately in
So that's that kind of dark
reliability
purple.
studies.
That's that dark purple battery storage line,
Yep. Let's see. Battery storage here.
like your
is
fifth
dark
line
purple.
item.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Apologies for jumping in, but to offer, one of the things that Surja, the bill that was discussed, did was create a state target for 3 gigawatts of battery storage capacity by 2035?
2030.
2030.
That was my part of the bill.
And so that's not really reflected here, right, Mark? Was this graph made with that in mind? Because that bar for battery storage is real small.
Right.
3 would look like a bigger chunk.
Yeah, this is from the agency I used to work for, is the Illinois Power Agency. The Power Agency put these graphs out in December of last year as part of the resource adequacy study. They did not include the 3,000 megawatts of batteries in this because the bill had not yet been passed. 3,000 megawatts, some of it will be in Ameren, some of it will be in PJM, Northern Illinois. So you should see a little bit more battery storage in this projection, which is good. That means you're moving closer to a higher level of reliability.
Aaron.
Thanks, Mark. Aaron Esri here. With that battery storage, this is basically, I guess, asking for your personal opinion, but do you think that goal will be able to be met of the 30%?
Which goal? The 3,000
Or
megawatts?
the gigawatts, I'm sorry, the total capacity of battery storage.
The 3 gigawatts. Right, and I threw megawatts at you, and we were talking gigawatts. I'm sorry. So 3 gigawatts for 3,000 megawatts.
I'm sorry. I was messing you up. Sorry.
No. It was me. I would say that they could definitely get there and have the assets in the field by 2030 if they have a successful kickoff for their first procurement this fall. The statute says, okay, you're going to do 3 gigawatts. That's 3,000 megawatts. The Illinois Power Agency needs to procure those assets. 1,000 of the 3,000 megawatts needs to be under contract by the end of 2026. And I know the agency's working on that now, but they really need to hit all of their marks to be able to get, things procured, contracted, built, and commissioned with MISO and PJM to meet that goal. I think it's aggressive, but workable.
Thanks.
Michelle.
Hey, Mark, on the same slide on the left side, ComEd, what are they going to do before 2033? What's their plan?
Well, that is the other big portion of Surja, was that the Illinois Commerce Commission now has to operate what is typically called an integrated resource plan. And that resource plan needs to take into account these projected shortages and then make changes to one or more of the following. They can increase the state's renewable portfolio standard and the budgets that go to supporting those deployments. So more wind, solar, and certain types of hydro. So that's one lever. Another lever is that they can increase the battery storage program, the 3 gigawatts or 3,000 megawatts of battery storage we were just talking about. They can require the utilities to enter into more agreements with behind the meter as well as front of the meter batteries. And they can increase the customer costs or the customer cost recovery for that. And they could also increase the state's energy efficiency portfolio standard. That would increase funding for the energy efficiency programs offered by Ameren in your area. They have one policy option. They can make a recommendation to the legislature. They can't act on their own, but they can recommend to the legislature to delay the implementation of the emissions step-down schedule that was set for fossil fuel plants back in 2022 with the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. So they have 4 levers, and with those 4 levers, they need to basically fill in that missing 1, 2, and 3 gigawatts that you see there in 2033, 34, and 35.
So am I understanding correctly that when you talk about the directing additional resources to the incentivization of creating more alternative energy, did I hear that right? That's one of the levers?
Yes, absolutely.
And so maybe I'm just super cynical, but I'm not going to guess that the pool of incentives is going to get larger, just that more of it is going to be directed towards ComEd versus the other ISOs.
Well, I think that each region has its own balance of supply and demand, so we'll probably see different solutions for the ComEd region that will appear different than the solutions that the ICC puts together for the Ameren region. Usually, regulatory decisions and statute try to maintain some level of balance between the ComEd and Ameren regions volumetrically, so that there's not an outsized cross-subsidization of one region to the other. I know that's always arguable, but I think it's not axiomatic that it's going to lead to higher resources going to ComEd. I don't know that will be the case because I don't know what solutions the ICC is going to deploy.
No questions. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Thank you so much for your time.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes our presentation. We can now pivot to item B on new business. Now item B, which are the proposed requirements for energy use and impact on the electrical grid for a big data center by Director John Hall.
Comments?
I will go if nobody else wants to go first. Yeah, I mean, I think that presentation on looking at the tax incentives from the feds disappearing makes using data centers to deploy renewable energy even stronger of a mandate. We need to get more renewables on the grid, and data centers are a pathway to do that. Not saying that we should get data centers just for that outcome, but it seems like a outcome that if we're going to have a data center, or if anywhere is going to have a data center, they should be bringing renewables along with them. So I guess I would on my quick line edits would be on the energy efficiency. So O1, I fully support this being included. Just noting that I believe the state already requires all buildings to meet the International Energy Conservation Code, which isn't to say that we shouldn't be redundant and also require them that they prove it, which is what this is doing. But this is, I believe, just a backstop on what the state already does. I would strike or previous so that they have to continue to meet the most recent International Energy Conservation Code, which again I believe is the state standard. On clean energy, I would love to see us be a lot more aggressive than 25%. I think we can certainly ask data centers to go much higher than that. I will note that this is simply nameplate capacity compared to peak electrical demand. So that isn't even meeting their full capacity needs, as was noted in the presentation. And perhaps it's not on Champaign County to fully get there or fix the grid on our own. In fact, we can't, as was discussed. But I do think that we can, again, get more renewables built out so that we can ensure that at least the data centers in Champaign County are doing their part. So, whether we decide to push that number to 100, which might run into some challenges with on-site, where those two words would end up confining us a little bit. I don't have all the policy solutions for off-site clean energy, but I do think as long as it's new, as long as we track it as new, and I don't have the policy answer today of how you track new, but I know that's solvable, and then also deliverable. So in MISO, we could allow some percent of the energy generation to also be off-site clean energy, new off-site clean energy generation. The acronym that we're using in the Power Act is bring your own new clean capacity and energy, and that doesn't have to be on-site.
Hey, Andrew, just before you keep going, when you say off-site, like, are we still talking within the county, or how far is off-site?
So the Power Act is written to be in the grid in MISO.
Okay.
So that's not even in our state necessarily.
So basically the goal is just as long as they're putting power into the MISO grid, it's considered off-site renewable energy towards the use of their data center. Yeah,
there's a concept called deliverable, and that is as far as I can really go. But if it's in your own grid, it's deliverable. I mean, they don't trace the electrons or anything. But that would help the on the capacity side in terms of the market. It would help that balance sheet as well, and just reduces the transmission burden overall by having it be in the same again. But we might say, let's say Illinois, because we want to see this be constructed local. Or we might say Champaign County because we want to see it constructed local, although I know there's a diversity of opinions on renewable energy in the county. So we could have, but I think certainly saying that they should be building renewables for this is the way I would like to see this group go. Did that answer your question? And so I don't have the technicals, but I could get them.
Yeah, because the language of what are we asking to document that you're actually adding energy in Illinois, I wouldn't even know where to look to find that.
Definitely, yeah, and I understand that, and I think that's why they said on site here, because presumably you can verify that much more easily than you can. And so I think that is, maybe it's my homework is there a way that this is something that is easy on the county to be able to confirm that there is new deliverable clean energy being built with the data center. If we pass the Power Act, that will be very easy for you. If we don't, I can see if there's a good way to get that done. And if not, I understand why we would just go with on-site, because it is the metric that we can measure.
Well, if it's new renewable energy in the county, we would absolutely know. That would be a super easy one. And we could consider off-site, just not like, what's the word I want where they're connected?
Behind the meter.
No. Yes, contiguous, right? So like, the data centers in the Northeast, and they build a very large solar array in the Southwest. But if they're both in the county, we would have the capacity to identify that as new energy.
Which comes first, the chicken or the egg?
And how do you
that's
prove,
a different question. Hold on.
how do you prove that you made that? How do you prove that you made that solar farm happen? These are some of the questions that I will, like I said, I think my homework is getting some of the policy answers on that, and some of those tools might be things that the Illinois Power Agency can do, and you can't, and that would be understandable if we couldn't go that way because we don't have access to those kind of tools. But it's definitely where I want to see if we can make this a bit more robust.
And I know I attended a meeting at the Farm Bureau this past winter, and the view there was that bring your own clean energy is just going to use up more best prime farmland for solar arrays. And again, that's up to the county board, but that's another thing to consider.
Yeah, I recognize that's going to be a tension that we will have to hold as a county and decide where we want to land on that. I guess I'll just get to my last note here. For storage, I would just want to make sure that this language is basically clear that we're talking about battery storage and not sort of having combustibles on site. That is, because you could argue that a fossil fuel, a bunch of diesel is a storage of energy that you could combust to turn it into electricity in a diesel generator. So if we feel like this meets that need, great. But that was just a thought I had. Is this clear enough that we want it to be battery storage? Oh, and my last thought, to Ty's point, and something that I think the Power Act would support is distributed generation being an answer. And this solves some of the prime farmland concerns, is how can we get data centers to pay for solar on homes and things like that? And I think that's actually a pretty complicated question. I'll be curious to follow up with the reading that you gave us and other places to find if we have a county level policy answer to that. But that does seem like another opportunity is, you have the data center track how many homes they've energized, and then that can be credited to them as demand, and that sounds like it would be a lot for the county to do. But it is an idea that it's very, and this is why state action here is really needed, because the state can do things that the county cannot.
Any other thoughts? Yeah, Aaron.
The idea of on-site, or if it was, let's say, in the county. So if we're requiring a solar farm, let's say it's solar, it's going to be solar or wind. I mean, either way, with the state saying we can't turn those down, I guess my question would be, would the state look at it as it's a data center first with just a supplemental tag along solar farm, or would they potentially look at it as that's a solar farm, you can't deny it?
My counter question would be,
my whole
how do we
thing is the
permit that?
idea that I don't want to lock the county into having to say, oh, we have to approve your solar farm. Because I don't like the idea of the state taking away that local jurisdiction. I just don't. I don't like the state taking away the local jurisdiction of anything that they've done or at any level, because I think the county should be able to control most of that. So that would just be, I guess, one of my questions is, would the state, like I say, the solar farm is contingent on the data center, or potentially would the solar farm be locked in no matter what? I mean, and then that would almost maybe lock in your data center as well. Just a thought.
Michelle.
So my question, I think, for John would be, our current data center ordinance idea, does that exempt a separate solar permit if they're putting solar on the same parcels as the data center?
If the solar farm is being built primarily to support a data center, we would call that a solar array.
To the data center,
Yeah.
not a separate solar farm.
Right. I don't know how the state would look at it, but that's the way our zoning ordinance would look at it.
Separate permitting, not required.
Well, no, actually, they both require a special use permit, because we have 5 data centers in the county right now They each have a supporting solar array. They each got a special use permit for the data center and for the solar array.
So they had to fulfill the requirements of both permits
Yep,
for the same project.
yep. And the array has to meet all of the requirements of a solar farm, except that it's behind the meter for the data center.
So it is a 2 permit process.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, and you could construct a mega special use permit that would be for both, but we just haven't had to do that yet.
And
The hearings proceed simultaneously.
so it sounds like they're separate, so they couldn't tie the data center project to the permit based on Champaign's current ordinance, is what I just heard you say.
Well, again, we would call that a solar array, not a solar farm.
And the solar array is still a separate permit from the X facility, whatever X is.
Yeah, you still need approval for both.
Right. And the citing law that existed and then the changes to it has, which we're not in compliance with, but if we were, it would have a definition of supporting facilities that does not describe the usage of energy. We should probably get a lawyer to look at it and just confirm that it would be considered separate, but I think we're safe from the concerns that you're identifying.
I think in that law, the supporting facilities they're contemplating are battery storage for solar farms, isn't it?
Switch yards, access roads, meteorological towers, storage containers, and equipment associated with the generation, storage, and dispatch. But all of that is separate from consumption.
So we maintain as much autonomy as we can. Am I understanding the conversation correctly?
That's our goal.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Kevin.
So number 3, the modular nuclear reactors, small modular reactors, or any other nuclear-based on-site energy production methods are prohibited. Can you talk to that just a little bit? How come we're prohibiting nuclear?
Well, that is strictly from Aurora. It hadn't occurred to me that, but once I saw it in the Aurora draft, I understood completely. There is a movement towards modular nuclear reactors. U of I wants to put one a few blocks from where I live. And, what the U of I wants to do is fine. I don't know that we want to see data centers putting up their own modular nuclear reactors. That's up to the task force. This is just a draft for you to massage.
Amy, I saw your hand.
Yes, so I was thinking, if we think that the idea of, I guess I'll make up some terms, offsite distributed solar, I don't know how we would call it, right? So if we have different municipal buildings which have solar panels, I don't know if that counts as an array or an offsite array or a distributed array. Would that require another class of permitting? So let's say for all of the city municipal buildings and different places around town that we, in a world, we'd like to have all those things to contribute to this 50% offsite. Was that another permitting situation?
I'm going to double check our ordinance here to see what the limit is on residential solar, which is allowed by right if it's within this limit. One megawatt is our threshold for what we allow by right. We've never seen anything get near that for a residential level.
And for like a private business?
Well, for a private we've never even seen a business go beyond that.
Okay.
But
Okay.
if
So-
they do, that becomes a solar array that needs
see.
a special use permit.
And then, I mean, if we're talking about asking for everything that we would like, right, if this is a shopping list or a wish list, so we might want to change this to not less than 50%, et cetera. But I guess I'm not understanding, is it possible to include things like jobs for this? Because it seems like if we're going to be putting solar on existing buildings and solar in like tucked on every home or whoever wants to opt in for this, right? It seems like we won't have the capacity right now, enough skilled people who are doing solar installs to meet the demand. Is that right? I mean, I don't really know the situation of solar in this town.
I don't know either. I know that we're doing a lot. Most of what we do these days is solar permitting.
Yeah.
So there's a big market out there. And normally, the issue of jobs is separate from the issue of zoning.
Yeah.
But
I guess, but I understand the issue of jobs is separate from the issue of zoning, but if, I just feel like frequently the question of jobs, whether they're temporary or permanent, has been a concern. It seems that there's somehow, somebody has to install all of these things, and I'm wondering who it is, and is there a way that we can specify that it's at least Illinois labor and not, labor from some other place?
that's a legal question, but I doubt that we could go that far. But
I gather Kevin would have some.
I know that there's other places that have put project labor agreements on projects like that. And so then you're using local labor, people from the workforce right here. I can tell you on solar farms that they could always use more people, but they have enough to get the solar farms done right now. They could always use more though.
I would support PLAs if we think we could do that in the county ordinance. And I guess that's another question for our lawyer, unless you already know the answer to that.
I think the answer is no, but that's worth asking the lawyer.
We can't, in the past, I mean, has it not, whenever we discussed it, right, it's a decision between the project that actually gets built and maintained, right? And so right now it's just the developer who we're working with. Is that, we would need to get further down the road, right? It's eventually that transfer is going to happen with somebody who actually owns the facility, and that's who we would need to make a labor agreement with. Is that right? Or who would need to comply with the labor agreement?
Well, the labor agreement comes at the time of contracting, and generally we're not even talking to, many of our projects are sold by the developer to someone else to actually build. So we're quite remote, when it goes through the county board.
Mm-hmm. Okay, got it. That is definitely something that we'll ask the lawyer.
I guess I'm just saying, I'm wondering how or if we can pull it forward to make sure that at least it's our local labor or our statewide labor gets an opportunity before we bring in labor from another state or prefab from another place. That's all.
Absolutely, I agree.
And a lot of the large scale utility wind and solar is already labor. I'm sure, Kevin, you could speak to this more, but the state has requirements for a lot of that for building renewables already. It's the small stuff is sometimes not labor, but all the big stuff, I believe, is.
Any additional questions? Yeah, Michelle.
I think it's important to remember that, ideally we can put PLAs in the ordinance, and we'll definitely thoroughly investigate that. But we are not a home rule county. So the fines and fees and repercussions that we would impose on any of our ordinance requirements being violated are very minimal. We are capped by the state on what we can do. And frankly, they're dollar amounts that these large data centers would laugh at. They would not, it would not bother them to just violate our ordinance all day long. And I bring this up because I'm very happy to see we have so many people here. And I want to make sure it's very, very clear that the reason this task force exists is to write the best ordinance that we possibly can under our current circumstances, which we are not home rule. We are severely limited in what we can and cannot do. And we cannot, the board has no legal authority to ban data centers. And it's the most dangerous step that they could make because it would put no parameters around anything that happened around a data center. So I just want to make sure that we have the right conversation happening and that there's not an expectation that is unrealistic of what this task force is going to put forward to the board and what the board is going to continue to discuss. But in our current structure, where we are not home rule, we cannot outright ban data centers, and we cannot impose significant fines and fees on violations of our ordinance that we draft. That's just not authority that the county has.
Thanks for that reminder, Aaron.
Kevin, you got asked about the nuclear reactors. I guess, yeah, I was kind of wondering about that myself. I don't believe the technology is there, but it is coming to have small. And I can't imagine that the scrutiny, the regulations that the state and feds will have around those would be to the point that when those become viable, I would think that it should be an option, I guess. I mean, I don't know how far, obviously, I don't know if anybody in this room anyway can have any kind of an accurate prediction as to when they might become viable for actual putting out in the field, you could say, and starting to construct them and use them. But I personally don't have a problem with them being a viable option when and if. Now, granted, the ordinance could be amended, but I don't know if it's worth banning them to begin with and then having to potentially go through the process of amending it to allow them, or should we just not, I guess, ban them right now and, right into the ordinance somehow that obviously, I mean, it could be kind of like the backing up of the International Energy Conservation Code. I mean, I don't know how much redundancy you want in here, but again, the scrutiny that they would be under before they would be able to be built legally. Now, I guess if someone wants to go out and put a Mr. Fusion, like from Back to the Future, and do something wild in their backyard, where that could have happened now anyway, I guess. But the idea that production, basically small scale, but a production nuclear facility, to me, isn't all that worrisome when that technology becomes viable.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at is, and you alluded to it, the university is putting in a micro reactor. They're getting their permits for it right now. I'm guessing that getting the permitting is going to be too long of a process for somebody right now. Not to say that in the future it might be something that's just, a lot shorter and there's better technology where it can just be brought in. And so I didn't know, what the task force, what their feeling is on that, but I'm not sure that we should ban it just because there might be, 10 years from now where we think, that isn't a bad idea to put in a micronuclear reactor.
Do we have any ordinances around
Yeah, we were just talking
nuclear
about that.
micro
That's a
reactor?
whole nother can of worms that we'd have to.
I'm just imagining those ELUC meetings in the public comment.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess I think it'd be, if we're going to have to write an ordinance for a micronuclear reactor, anyways, would striking a ban from this as part of whatever that process looks like not be very doable?
You mean like in the future?
Yeah. So let's say we ban it now, and then it's 5 years from now, and now SMRs are coming, and the ELUC decides that we want to welcome SMRs, and we're going to write an ordinance for that. Striking this line could just be part of that ordinance.
And just in case, so the task force understands this, every requirement for a data center can be subject to a request for a waiver. So 5 years from now, someone could say, hey, we now have these great standards. I want a waiver to allow my modular nuclear Mr. Fission to power my data center. And then that would be part of the approval or disapproval.
Additional comments, concerns, hot takes?
Asking if we want to ban nuclear.
That might be another committee, Deb.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
What?
Well, I would support keeping this in here for now, given that even if there is a world where they start coming, it doesn't sound like this will be the barrier that stops it.
Oops, they would have to ask for a waiver.
Which they could even do, like, the
Yeah.
first permit we get
Right.
could ask for that. Like, it's not something that has to wait. It's just that we don't need to tackle the idea of writing a nuclear ordinance also on top of everything else.
But there's no provisions for, taking care of the nuclear waste or anything like that put in here?
So all of that would probably become part of the conversation if someone asked for that variance. Then it would have to be addressed.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's okay. We're going to ban it here. And then basically what you're saying is any conversation could be happening in the future at all, any conversation at all. So we'll have that conversation when we have it, and we'll have the nice safeguard here, which lets us avoid this debate that would make this process even longer and more challenging.
I think it's also one of the benefits of public policy, right? It can be amended, it can be changed as time changes, community needs change, that sort of thing. Okay, additional.
So just real quick for everyone watching at home, the ban on nuclear power is remaining in the draft ordinance.
Okay, got it. Thank you for that reminder. Okay, seeing no other comments or feedback. Yep.
Well, do I make a proposal or an ask to see a draft that has a higher percentage, and then we discuss that? Do we want to have a vote on decisions like that? I'm continually kind of trying to seek process, understand where folks stand on things so we can start to get to compromise.
Do you have language numbers that you want to, like, how specifically do you want to propose something?
I guess there's a couple questions. One is just like, what is this percentage? What number is the 25? And so that I'm tempted to say, well, we'll just start at 100 and work down from there. But I understand that maybe that doesn't seem reasonable. Although there is in Minnesota a 100% renewable energy data center going in. So not impossible. And then the offsite, onsite question becomes, one question is how do we feel about it? And then the other question is how do we do it? And both matter, right? So maybe if everybody's like, we really don't like that idea, we want it to all be on site, then we don't have to figure out how we're going to do it. But if we're going to spend the time to figure out how, and I'm happy to make that effort, even if we end up not doing it, of course. But both those two pieces, I think 100% and on site feels quite restrictive to me, and perhaps not possible to get to. So that's why I would go for off site. If there's concern that 100% allowing off site, do we want that in Champaign County because we want to keep things local? Do we not want that in Champaign County because of prime farmland? That's a tension that I would like others to be offering into the process. And, then we can come to some answers there.
And it would seem to me that it's not just a Champaign County preference, but it goes to feasibility. If you're going to require 100% even offsite feasibility with the scale that we're anticipating for these hyperscale data centers, we haven't yet seen a solar farm that big.
Joliet area just approved an 860 megawatt solar farm.
Yes.
So that would be enough to, and that is enough to fund a data center?
That is enough to, the ask here as it's written is that the nameplate of the solar has to meet the demand. So the nameplate of demand. The reality is that you need to look at generations, but we're not asking that. So we're cheating a little bit is what we're doing. And having an and here where they have backup battery on site helps move. The whole point of batteries is that it moves that peak demand. Mark's talking about, well, the peak demand's moving later when solar's generating less. Well, batteries kind of cheat that, right? Batteries say, no, let's move that peak demand back to an earlier time of the day. And so anyways, I think we're not actually trying to match electron for electron. We're just trying to say it's important to build out renewables, and let's build out, like the data centers are bringing buckets of money. Let's get them to help us hit our clean energy targets that are important for a whole slew of reasons.
I would say just from a strategy standpoint of getting this passed, off-site outside of Champaign County being acceptable is the best way to go. I understand that we definitely would have to think through language on how would we know. But I think the restriction of deeming on-site to be required to be in Champaign County will become a major sticking point. Yeah. Especially if you want to increase the percentage. I think you can get a much higher percentage if you define offsite as outside of including outside of Champaign.
And I actually wasn't advocating for within Champaign County.
I'm just saying of like our kind of combinations that we could put together here.
I mean, I think the main tension is the workforce versus concerns around prime farmland, right? And I would love to keep jobs as local as possible. Whatever that scope is fine. If it seems like maybe Illinois is a good balance here. I would love to see us help hit our clean energy targets, which means keeping it in Illinois is advantageous to us. And it means that a lot of the jobs, whether or not they're Champaign local, they will be union jobs because we've got those state policies locked in to protect the union work at the utility scale. So maybe that's our compromise that fits kind of multiple stakeholders.
So is that a recommendation to use 100% for clean energy, but specify that it doesn't have to be on site? I don't know how that wording actually plays out, but is that an actual motion? Is that something you want me to bring back to the task force?
Do folks want to take this home and think about it, and then we can have a proposal for like a written proposal for next month's discussion?
Yes. I think having something in writing, having John take a swing at it, also having some discussion points ready for us to talk through to help guide the discussion, I think would be a good next step for this.
If I could ask, do you want to require both clean energy and storage?
I mean, yes.
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 Okay, I'll bring back that alternative.
And I recognize the answer might be we have no way to track this within Illinois, and so we just can't do it. And so I'll help you see what I can turn over.
All right, additional comments for John? Okay, seeing none, we can now move on to other business. So that's the date of our next meeting. That is July 13th. We are going to focus on backup generators, noise, vibration, and minimum separations. I have no chair's report. Next steps.
So will that be added to the agenda?
Yeah, could we add that discussion to the agenda?
Yep,
Okay, it'll be like a bulleted item.
that's right.
Okay. Are we, on our list of topics, are we looking at decommissioning and that bonding, that sort of thing?
That came up.
I don't know if we have a full agenda of topics, but I just wanted to lift that back up. It's more and more top of mind for me.
Our ordinance requires decommissioning only for non-adaptable structures, and it seems to me that a data center is eminently adaptable to other uses. So we'd have to provide the logic that this big square building is not adaptable to other uses, but that seems self-evident.
I do remember the presenter from the city of Aurora wished that they had put more time into a discussion on decommissioning. Is that other people's memories, recollections?
Yeah, I can look into it more. I can maybe offer some ideas for decommissioning for next time. I'm thinking about like sunk costs towards water resources, but I guess that's Illinois Americans' problem, not yours. Or treatment, but that's Urbana Sewer's problem, not yours. And I guess verifying the claim of is the big data center reusable? And what are the costs that the city incurs to like have a big data center that may be reusable, but nobody's reusing it because it's just a warehouse in the middle of nowhere with a bunch of solar panels on it that are hopefully chugging away and giving us energy to our grid.
That actually is a good point, Andrew. We're expecting these data centers to be some distance away from the urban center and the rural road network. I mean, what would be the most likely redevelopment of a big data center? A huge warehouse, which is not really compatible with rural roads. And frankly, that's been the question in my mind from the beginning is how would it be reused?
It's decommissioning to me. That to me is when I say decommission. I mean, that's all the full, like, what are the possible stranded assets that the county will have to, when you've got a building like that isn't used, what do you do? And I do think there's a real chance that we end up in overbuild and then unused data centers for one reason or another. So, and I'm certainly not an expert to think through all of it, but I think we should try.
I agree.
Would you say our ordinance requires that it just be adaptable? What ordinance are you speaking of?
Our zoning ordinance.
So ours, our overall zoning ordinance
It has a section on decommissioning in general,
in general. Okay.
which is required there has to be a finding that it's a non-adaptable structure.
And in the data center ordinance, can we define them automatically as non-adaptable and require a different decommissioning plan?
You might be able to define it that way, but I just don't see the logic in that. But
I'm just trying to understand what our legal options are. So in terms of the ordinance that we already have versus the ordinance that we're trying to write.
I hope the legal option is to be realistic and recognize that a large metal building in the countryside is eminently adaptable to other uses. What it does suggest is maybe that's part of the location criteria in the beginning, to make sure that it's on a good rural road or located in such a way that it helps with the adaptability.
Yeah, I mean, I just think we have so many, one, it's probably going to be in a volunteer fire district, right? So if something happens in that building, it's a very small fire department that has to respond. The roads might not be top of the list for being plowed and maintained. So just turning it eventually into a warehouse would generate significantly more activity, which I think costs the taxing bodies in those areas money in different ways is what I'm most concerned about.
And you need to get their approvals in the beginning for your data center development. I mean, to me, decommissioning means removing the building, removing the concrete, and restoring to farmland, and that is not realistic.
Sure, I agree with maybe that, unless we want to go there to restore the prime farmland, which might not be restorable. What costs? I don't run a county, so what cost does a building, like we've put in a very large building? Maybe we shouldn't talk about this today, but the question that I would like somebody who knows what to think through is, what are the costs that we would have if we built a large structure? And you were kind of getting there. What about fire? What maintenance costs are we going to have to cover to make sure a building like that maybe isn't getting vandalized? Or, those kind of costs, what does that look like? Do we have an example in the county? Is there a big abandoned building somewhere?
Like DART? I mean, there must be history on that. What's happened with that? Or
I mean, the issue is those are within the municipality, right? You need to drive 20 miles out. There's nothing going to be around it. There's going to be no significant tax base around it. It's not going to have significant, sewer, roads, again, fire protection. the ambulance service. So if you turn it into something where there are many people coming in and out, that's a whole different thing that you've brought to this area now that needs different support. And I think worst case scenario is that a very large metal box is built and then abandoned. And now it is the county's problem because it's an unincorporated land and eventually will become our responsibility if no one is paying the taxes and taking care of it. I think there is a much larger conversation about decommissioning that needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So just so I'm clear, decommissioning includes both removal of the structures and the foundation, as well as the potential reuse adaptation of the buildings, both categories. That's under the decommissioning umbrella. Is that right?
It can be. Decommissioning generally is thought of as removal and restoration,
Okay,
but you could think up different kinds of decommissioning.
okay.
We call it stranded asset protection.
Okay, I'm just, so I would imagine that it is not possible to restore the farmland that was there. I mean, I'm reading accounts of they just scrape off the top 14 inches of topsoil and they just dump it. Maybe this has already happened. Have we talked to some agronomists about what would be required to at least set it back to decent farmland or possible agricultural land?
It sure sounds like this should be a separate meeting. I mean, we could bring in presenters to, I don't know, let us know what that process is like, what to expect, and what kind of goals we can set for ourselves reasonably with our decommissioning policy here.
Okay, thanks.
Does that give you direction, Kate? Yeah. Okay. Additional thoughts, concerns? Okay, are we sure we don't want to stay here until 9 o'clock again?
I had one
Your
other
choice.
question for Andrew. I believe last time you had said that you were looking for some kind of, I don't know, post-meeting debrief. Is that correct? Something where we would discuss the presentations?
Not post-meeting. I was looking for, I mean, last time we had an hour and a half of presentations. And so I was looking for, when do we actually talk about, what we did today was great. I thought this meeting it was nice to have a lighter presentation and a chance to kind of start doing the deliberation. So not necessarily offline, more like just an intentional, we're going to discuss. And I would love if it said, let's discuss water on a future agenda. That's not let's have an hour and a half of presentations that were very valuable and useful, but let's now then do the discussion about water so that we all come prepared to be okay, we learned a lot about water. What are the ideas that we want to offer in addition to what was already in the ordinance?
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Kate, so we have the generators, noise, vibration, and now decommissioning, and those are our last two set topics, right? Do we have another topic that we are trying to? I don't have it in front of me. I think we're kind of running to the end of our presentation topics that we had already outlined earlier on. So, we could definitely try to keep the presentation shorter at the next two so that there is more time. But then after that, all of your meetings can just be hashing out details. Ideally at that point with all the information in front of you. So,
do we owe a report? Wasn't there a 3-month report, a prelim recommendation report idea? Ooh, no?
Not that I remember. Not that I recall. I mean, we can check in if we need more time. That's something that we can offer. But I mean, we just need to be communicating generally with BLUC, and Genlock is often here. So,
My other question was, if I have questions of one of the presenters, do I need to CC anybody on the task force, or I can just contact them and ask my question myself?
you can contact. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any other concerns? All right. I see a thumbs up. With nothing left to discuss, at least for the purposes of this meeting, I now adjourn this meeting of Data Center Activities Task Force.